sewer fund. The restricted is about 491,000, almost 492,000. Again, they earned interest of almost $26,000, and they spent $15,000 for a portion of the camera van. $30,000 was committed for an emergency generator, but that was not purchased this year, and it's again requested in the 2024 budget, but the estimate now is $60,000. I'll let Greg explain why the increase between the 30 and 60. I think it has to do with how the generator has to be placed on a structure.
It's really just that the cost, it's an updated cost estimate. The original cost estimate is a couple years old. With updated pricing, it's.
Thank you, Greg. And again, the proposed rates are to increase the minimum by $10 and the rate table by 10%. And with the same statistics that we reported on the water fund, about 49.6% will have a $10 increase in their sewer bill. So in total, almost 50% will only have a $20 increase in their annual billing. 34% will realize a maximum of $26.72 for their sewer, and the next stage of about 13.6% will realize a maximum of $89 for their sewer bill. So at this time, Greg and I are not recommending any transfers from the unrestricted fund to the reserves for the restricted equipment, only because we want the unrestricted fund balance to get a little bit more strength before we restrict any of those for any future purchases. Any questions?
Actually, could you repeat the second, you had said the second step, 37 to 75,000 gallons in the sewer. How, approximately what percentage of our?
That's 34.3%.
I don't think I have that. Sorry, maybe I did. Okay, I apologize, don't hold it up for me.
That's okay.
If I can answer somebody later, I will. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I have that.
I have extra copies. What are you missing?
No.
Oh, no, I have it. It's buried under all the rest of the stuff I brought.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. That, again, the second level is about just over 34%. That would be $26.72 if they hit the maximum.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Also, I believe the local law for the sewer rates is being laid
in the package for the 7 o'clock.
for 7 o'clock, okay. Water rates can just be adopted by motion. Sewer rates needs a local law and a hearing, public hearing, and Carrie's got that prepared for you for the 7 o'clock council meeting. Okay, so for the general fund, this one's going to be obviously a little bit more information. So I'd like to start with this report that was on the top. And so the general fund history report. This shows the fund balance history going back to 2000.
This one, right?
This one right here.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so you will see that 2022, the end results for 2022, there's 4 categories that gets reported on the audited financial statements. One is non-spendable. Non-spendable is when you have prepaid something or you've bought inventory that hasn't been fully expended yet, things like that. That's considered non-spendable from your fund balance because you've already paid for it, but you have not distributed it through your profit and loss statement yet. The next is restricted. Those are whatever we restrict for, like our public safety, our highway equipment reserves, and things like that. Assigned is made up of your outstanding encumbrances. Those are for orders for goods and services that you ordered by the end of the year, but they have not been received yet. So that automatically modifies the next year's budget, and that's why it's called assigned. Also assigned is whatever you've appropriated in your next year's budget for the use of fund balance. Then the unassigned is everything that is left over from your entire and total fund balance. So you will see that from 2021 to 2022, our total fund balance went from 13.9 up to 15.6. That was an increase of 1.7. And I also want to stress, and I'm going to read these out loud, basically for the public's, who's listening, for their benefit. The reasons that we have strong fund balances and reserves, and we just don't leave everything in an unrestricted balance, is by NICOM's Local Government Management Guide. These are the reasons. You want to consider prudent management of your funds, saving for future projects, acquisitions, and other allowable purposes. This shows the reader that you're forward-thinking and you're preparing for the future. Reserves provide a mechanism of legally saving money to finance all or part of the future's infrastructure, equipment, or other requirements. It provides a degree of financial stability. It provides welcome budgetary options that can help mitigate the need to cut services or to raise taxes because you've already set those funds aside. And that is our goal that we've discussed before as far as taking all the equipment purchases out of the reserves that we've already set aside. It also generates interest income earnings on those reserves because any of those reserves that are invested, the interest goes automatically into those reserves. It's a cushion for unforeseen expenditures or revenue shortfalls and ensures adequate cash flow. It provides for unanticipated events such as natural disasters or pandemics. So for example, if we did not have the strong fund balances that we had during COVID in 2020, the council has the authority to unrestrict those reserves and use it for operations. That gives the council a tool to get us through natural disasters. The 2006 flood, believe it or not, it took us 10 years until 2016 to get all our money from FEMA for that particular flood disaster. Our strong fund balances carried us through without having to borrow any money to be able to fund all of those repairs. It also saves costs for the taxpayer by eliminating the need for short-term financing. As I just said, we didn't have to borrow or do any BANs or notes. It also affects the city's bond rating. When we go out for bonds, they will look at what our reserves are and how we have set them up, knowing that we are being very conscious of how we're handling our monies. This goes into our bond rating. It attracts investors for bond issuances. It's proactive practices that demonstrates to the public and other agencies that the city's attention to its financial needs. It helps mitigate financial impact on major non-reoccurring or unforeseen expenditures on the annual budget, and helps smooth out spikes in annual budget and the real property tax law. So I know we've discussed this before, but I think it's worth repeating and also worth for the public to hear. And in summary of this first page, the general fund's restricted reserves increased a net of just over $700,000 in 2022. And the reason I say it was a net is because we had transferred $825,000 to the reserves, but we also spent. And you're going to see that in a summary in just a moment. And then all of our other balances increased just over $1 million. So the total increase was 1.7. And also, I just want to point out that the unassigned fund balance compared to our 2023 adopted budget was 57.58%. Our fund balance policy is to not let it go below 35%. Okay, any questions on that schedule?
Could you go back over column C, the restricted? I think you just mentioned that you can, through the county council, unrestrict some of those funds.
Yes, you
But
can.
if they're already encumbered?
If they're already encumbered, you would either have to cancel the order. You know, for example, if we had, the ambulance is a good example because that's just about to arrive. If we had to unreserve all of the funds, we would have to be able to see if we could actually cancel the order without any financial burden.
Right. But a good practice would be to just look at the unassigned as revenue that could be placed somewhere,
Yes,
could be assigned somewhere.
yes. Yeah, which we're gonna talk about in a little while. Okay, so if we flip the page, this provides you a history of going back to 2000 to 2024, and it's the adopted or the tentative budget, and it breaks it down by our revenue sources. And what I put on here was our major revenue sources, which is the tax levy, sales tax, ambulance fees, fire contract, state aid, and then I just put everything else in all other, appropriated fund balance and appropriated reserves. Appropriated reserves is when we appropriate monies from our restricted reserves to purchase equipment in the next year. Our appropriated fund balance is when we appropriated our unassigned funds. And what I would like to note here is that if you look at 2020 compared to 2024, our tax levy revenue source made up about 27.7% of our revenue sources in 2020. In 2024, it's 27.1%. Sales tax, right about the same percentage, 27.8 to 27.8. Ambulance has gone down a little bit, 7.5 to 5.1. But I want to clarify that in 2020, we were anticipating at pre-COVID levels of ambulance activity, plus the same payer mix that we had. And had the pandemic not happened, I believe we would have hit that 1.3 million. Because of the average payment that we were getting on all of our ambulance, our town versus our city, what we ended up doing was making the same rate for both of them. And we would have realized that revenue, but because of the pandemic, things changed. Our state aid has not changed since 2011. I know we've talked about this before. NICOM every year tries to get the state to look at changing the state aid formulas, but so far has been unsuccessful, and I think the mayor has been an advocate in Albany on that topic. All other, it's basically the same, 10.9 to 9.4. Some of it has decreased, but nothing in the majority. One of the main areas that has been decreased has to do with bail reform. Our court fines used to be about $125,000 a year, they're now about $40,000. And then the appropriated fund balance. This is the area that has had the major increase. It was about, you'll see, if you go back to 2015 and later, you'll see that we used a lot, ranging up to about, I want to say ranges from 4% to over 8%. And we haven't done that until recent years. We're now up to 9.4. And the appropriated reserves are pretty consistent. Those are one-time shots. So I just wanted to briefly go over the revenue sources that we currently have. Also, just to update everyone, we got our first sales tax payment on the cannabis sales. It was about $6,200. I do not know how much it's going to generate, but we will be receiving it quarterly. So as I get more information on that, I will let you know. We also got our sales tax check today for the month of September. And it was about $13,000 lower than last year, but we are still over $250,000 greater year to date. So we're doing very well on sales tax.
Jenny, I have a question.
Yes,
On the ambulance, you've increased that line projected for 80,000.
yes.
What's the current collection, not billing, collection on the ambulance fund?
Oh, I didn't bring that stat with me, but
Still around 320?
yeah, it's still about the same dollars. It just the ambulance activity itself has greatly increased, and I feel that they're getting back to pre-COVID level. I think we're going to exceed 2,200 ambulance billable calls this year. But Len, I will email the collectible rate for you. I did not bring that with me.
Because the chief, you're pacing or you're trending to get to 3,600 calls for the year?
A little shy of that, yeah.
And about 77% of that is EMS, correct?
Roughly.
From the stats you gave me the other day. So that's why I feel comfortable in raising the ambulance, just looking at the billing history that we've had over the past not only for 2023, but also late 2022.
Just trying to do the math in my head, that would be about an additional 220, give or take, calls.
Yeah, because we had gotten down to about 2,000 annual calls, where the average used to be about 2,200, and I think we're going to at least meet that, if not go over it. Any other questions? Okay, so the next page is the expenditure history. And what I did here is, again, going back to 2000 to the 24 tentative, is I showed the total budgets and broke it out between salaries, fringe benefits, other post-employment benefits for our retirees, our equipment, contractual debt service, and transfers to capital projects. And here what I would like to highlight is if you look at the salary percentages over the years, it ranges from almost 50% down to about 38% of the budget. So the salary expenses did increase from 23 to 24, from about 40% to about 42%. But where we're really getting hurt in our salary and fringe benefit packages for our employees is our health insurance and our fringe benefit costs now, and this year it's retirement from New York State. So if you look at it, if you look way back, fringe benefits used to be 10 to 20%, but now it's over 23%. And when you take that percentage on that large of a dollar, it's a lot of increase. Post-employment, that's actually decreased, and that is because in recent years we've gotten a great decrease in our 65 plus plan. It used to be $327 per month, and it's now $190 per month. So that provided a lot of savings for the city. Now, as I told the council before, the change to the consortium has, for 24 budget, between the consortium and the changes we did in the contracts by increasing the employees' contribution, has saved the budget over $500,000 citywide. So it was really a great benefit. Had we stayed in the plan that we had this year, the rates were expected to go up 21%. Equipment, again, that varies just based on whatever equipment that we're using, but again, the percentage is right around average. Contractual, down in 2020 was just under 22%, it was 21.8, and right now it's 22.8. And debt service is about 4% of the budget. The major thing that we've had to change since 2019 is our transfers to capital project funds. We used to be able to budget from the general fund to put towards street projects. We have not been able to do that. However, we have gotten additional state Turing aid through the state of $740,000 a year. So right now, all of our state aid, our CHIPS, our fill our potholes, our Pave New York, our extreme weather is funding all of our street repairs instead of it coming from the general fund. I don't want to say all, because for example, we had to bond West Street, but we also put some of that Turing aid towards that project. And we're also putting some of that towards the River Street project, correct, Ray?
Yeah, the recent culvert replacements is under the $25.
Yeah. Any questions there?
Perhaps I should wait till the end, but I just wanted to clarify something from my understanding. So on the first page, the unassigned funds, this is at the end of 2022.
Correct.
Before we took out $1.1 million for the 2023 budget? Or after?
No, that was after.
After? Oh, okay, that's good news.
Yeah.
Because we're proposing to take another 1.8.
Yeah, but we're going to get to that.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to go over in detail.
I just wanted to know where we were going to land, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Okay, and then the last page just gives you the tax levy history. And again, this goes back to 2000. This particular schedule shows the 2024 tentative to be at the tax cap, which I'm assuming we're going to talk in detail about that in just a little while. But the average, since 2000 has been a little over 82,000 on average per year, or about 2%, over the past 24 years. Yes,
When you said 2002, when, was that, do you know if that was, above the cap, or was that the cap?
we didn't have the cap
Oh, it
was
didn't
not,
exist,
the
right.
cap did not become effective until 2012.
That's right, okay.
What was the reasoning why we went in 2002 to 6.9?
I would have to look back to see. I do not remember. I'd have to go back to study the budget.
And then it was 7 or 8 to, below it, 2 points.
Yeah, I see that, 7 and
7 and 8, the reason that they did the negative 100,000 each year was we were getting additional state aid in those years for, I don't remember the particular reason. So what they did is they applied it to the tax levy.
Is that the same for 17, where it went down 0.07%?
No, the reason it went there is because we had new pilot agreements coming into effect. And as I've told you before, when a pilot agreement goes up, that affects the tax cap. So that means if you make up your tax cap in all of your pilot agreements, the levy will actually have to go down. Because if you stay within the cap, you're only allowed to raise a certain amount between the two sources.
Anything further?
And so did D Street's pilot start in this 2024?
2024, yes.
that was like 70?
It's 70,000 between all the municipalities. So we will have to share that between the school, the county, and the city. So the school's gonna get about 50% of that. I'm estimating about 23,000 for the city. Okay, the next report, this details all of the reserves for you. So, and I also did it kind of in book form for you to put into your binder. But this history goes back to 2015, and this shows you every restricted reserve that the general fund has. And it will also includes the 2023 estimate. I have 2 lines for 2023. It includes the year-to-date that we've already realized, and then I did an estimate for November and December for how much interest or expenditures I think that we're going to incur by year end. Also, to the far right of the schedule, I have showed any outstanding purchase orders that we have either committed by placing the order, or we have passed resolutions to reserve the funds. And if you flip to page 2, the top one is public safety. You're going to see there to the right side that 120,000 is listed for the cameras. It was for the security cameras for the police department on Main Street. Those funds can be released because those funds were, or those cameras were funded through the NYPA Smart Cities grant. So that 120,000 we can take off of this list with council's okay, and that money can go back into the public safety reserve. And also, while we're talking about NYPA, I just want you to know that the total project for the street lights and the LED project and the smart cities came in under budget by $306,000. So I'm going to be looking and getting permission from the state what I can do with that. The reason it's a little complicated is because there was a bond issuance So what I would like to do is to take the 306 and apply it towards the local portion we need for the demo of 27 Market. But the state may make me reserve it for future debt payments, but I will update the council when I get a final answer. All of this reserve detail also ties out to all of your other schedules that you have in your possession. Okay, the next page, which is on the legal side, is the general fund projected balances. Now you're going to see that I started the schedule going back to 2020. The reason I did this is because there were some inquiries about how our fund balance has grown since 2020. So this schedule, if you just look at the top of it, it's broken out between unrestricted, restricted, and total. And I've already gone over the definitions of those categories. So at the end of 2020, the total fund balance was about 12.5 million. The changes in fund balance for 2020 was about 1.3 million. And again, the changes for 2021 was 1.7. And I've projected the changes for 2023 to be 1.1 for total, but then we have some outstanding encumbrances for the restricted of 871,000. The main reasons, I went back and I studied 20, 21, and 22. The main reasons for the surplus was unanticipated sales tax revenues. We were conservative in our budgeting because we did not know because of COVID, and also we did not know if the increased sales tax had to do with the COVID funding, if it was inflation, if it was temporary. But you also have to remember in 2019, they implemented sales tax on internet sales. And we did not know what the effect of that was going to be. But history in those 3 years provided us some good numbers. So we also had other areas, for example, code enforcement on their administrative fees. Some years we had additional ambulance revenues because we were budgeting conservatively because of the pandemic. Also, our interest income has gone way up in 2023. The other leading factor for why we had surpluses has to do with personnel vacancies. And the number of vacancies that we have had over the past 3 years have amounted to one year it was almost $600,000 in savings. Another year it was $755,000 in savings between the salaries and the fringe benefits. Just going to give you an example. When I was preparing the 2024 tentative budget and I was doing the health insurance for all of the active employees, I said, oh wow, these numbers are looking really good. But then I filled it in for all the vacant positions. It increased the citywide budget by over $700,000 just for health insurance. So by having those vacant positions in those years, that is the main reason for the surpluses in those years. Obviously, we want our budget to reflect a fully staffed budget, all departments to be fully staffed. That's why I do not support budgeting vacancies, because I think it is a misrepresentation of what the city needs. We already have a skeleton crew, and when we have vacancies, it makes it even that much more difficult on the current employees. So for the projections for 2023, as I said, the numbers are saying that we're going to have about 1.1 surplus in our unreserved, unrestricted funds. And we're going to be using, in actuality, about 30,000 of the restricted funds when we get to the interest and all the expenses that we've done. And we also have outstanding encumbrances of about 871,000. The majority of that 871,000 is the ambulance. That's about just under 400,000. And then I will also be taking the cameras out of that, which is 120. So that's the top part of this report. And as you go down, I showed you the reserve detail that makes up the 4.1 million of restricted funds. That is also detailed on the report that we just went over for all of our different reserves. And then I also showed you the activity for 2023. So the estimated interest earnings is about 235,000, and the restricted donations is about 62,000. As you know, we receive an annual donation of 55,000 to go towards future purchases of ambulances. And as we get those funds, we put them right into the reserves, and they build up in time. So when the next ambulance purchase is there, hopefully we've got most of the funding for it. Then for the public safety reserve, I listed the different items. The 120 we'll be able to cross off the list, but these are either what has been purchased or what has an outstanding encumbrance. And then, so there's the patrol car, the impact system, extrication equipment for the fire department, and the ambulance. You're gonna see the ambulance listed twice because we funded it from two sources. One was from the public safety reserve and the other was restricted donations. The highway equipment reserve, we have an outstanding purchase order for the international truck, and then we also bought the bucket truck. Sidewalk, streets and sidewalks, 41,000 for sidewalk repairs. The repair reserve, we refurbished Field 6, and we repaired the Wilbur Park pool filtering system. The IT were purchased, the new servers, which Pyramid is working on now. Crime proceeds is a cold storage unit for the police evidence. And the Mayor's Cup is just the Mayor's tournament that SUNY runs. But funds
Which
come
has
in.
not happened.
Pardon me?
Which has not happened for a while.
No, we've had it every year. Every year. It's just a smaller event, but yes. Yep.
They don't really advertise it.
You would think I would know.
They really don't advertise it, that's,
Yeah.
just kind of have it together.
Interesting.
So,
It's not like it used to be.
Apparently not.
so that, and I also color coded the numbers so you can figure out what ties into what. Cool. Any questions on that? Okay, so if we go to the next page, what I would like to talk about is the possible use of fund balance. So this schedule is basically the same as the one we just went over. But what I'm showing you here is the change from 2020 to 2023. So the estimated increase from our unrestricted fund balance is 4.2 million from 2020 to 2023. So possible uses of that $4 million. I don't want to talk about the 1.8 right now. What I would like to talk about are the ones after it first. Highway equipment, we would like to add 350,000 to the reserve. You will see that the highway equipment only has a balance of 144,000. That reserve needs to be replenished. The parking reserve, we would like to add 400,000 of it because, as you know, we're going to be implementing paid parking. That's going to take some infrastructure and engineering services and hardware to get that up and running. So we would like to set those monies aside to get that going. Public safety, we'd like to add 250,000. That would bring the public safety reserve up to about 1.1 million. That's in anticipation of partially funding the fire truck. I don't want to use the entire thing for the fire truck, but we could use some of it. The IT reserve, we would like to add 60,000 to that. That will bring that reserve up to over 100,000 in anticipation of upgrading to the Tyler. That's going to be a major investment, and I would just like to set some of the funds aside for the initial. The initial implementation, I think, is going to be a little over 200,000. And then I've got here a central garage transfer. It's $200,000. This will not be going into reserve, but I would like council's permission to take $200,000 of cash of the general fund and transfer it over to the central garage internal service fund. And the reason being is this. Internal service fund is funded by all the different funds throughout the city because they maintain all the city's equipment. And all of that expense is funded through work orders. However, what it does not fund is the purchase of inventory parts and also any type of equipment the central garage has to buy for all of their lifts or all of their tools and things like that. So usually Central Garage is running in a negative cash balance. And the general fund, I will book do-tos and do-froms at the end of the year, so it looks very pretty on the financial statements. However, next year, there's two major pieces of equipment that they need to purchase. It's a lift and a forklift. It's gonna be about $105,000, something like that. I would like to advance the cash if council approves to be able to cover those purchases. However, that will get replenished over the years through depreciation because it's a proprietary fund, and that's how those things get funded when they're not funded up front. That would eliminate the negative cash reporting and the do-tos and do-froms. So I would just like you to think about that, and maybe by year end, tell me what your decision is. The next thing is Demaski Field, which we were briefly talking about before the meeting started. Back in 2018, the city was awarded a SAM grant. And the official narrative for the SAM grant is a state and municipal facilities program. It's a DASNY grant. And we were awarded $1 million for the Demaski Field improvement that we did. It was phase 1 of the Demaski Field. However, our senator has changed, and the sponsor, who is the senator, has to get this award moved through the legislature to get it funded. We have been waiting since 2020 for movement on this grant, and we're not making any progress. The mayor has conversed with our current senator. I believe there's 23 municipalities that were promised these SAM grants that the state is probably not going to fund. So right now, we have a capital project that has a negative $1 million of cash in it, which I've been reporting as a due from. The general fund has been carrying this deficit. So I would like council to consider using $1 million of the fund balance to cover that capital project. Now, if for some reason we get a surprise and they actually do fund that SAM grant, then we can return that $1 million to the general fund. But it's consideration that I would like the council to consider. Then you will also see that I listed the fire truck with a blank amount. Because the chief and I, well, the chief mainly, has been working on the specs for the fire truck, and we are going to be having a conference call for different finances. He's also investigating other grants. So once we have more information on that, we will bring it forward to the council for consideration. But I did not want you to think that we were not looking at it. I was actually trying to figure out how I could just come in here tonight and say, hey, we can fund the $2 million fire truck, but I just don't see that happening. If the council approves this $4 million, which includes the 1.8 for the 2024 budget, that's going to bring the unassigned fund balance down to about a little over $7 million. And that will be just about 37% of our adopted budget. That's a little close for me because of our 35% guide. And that's one reason why I want you to seriously consider going over the tax cap, and we'll get into that conversation in a little while. So those are our recommendations of possible uses for the fund balance, and we just need council's feedback and approval. Not tonight, but in the future.
Okay.
Is this, are these unrestricted that we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay, because they're not matching up with the use of reserves in the budget, and that's because they're from two different funds.
Yes. This is where we can take our unrestricted or unassigned fund balance and put restrictions on
Okay.
it, okay?
Sorry, I'm just kind of curious. I feel like it's just a lot of information.
It is.
The Demaski Field project, can you just explain that really quickly one more time?
Sure. Back in 2018, we did a Demaski Field capital project. We took down the grandstand, we took down, I think, bleachers, we redid infields, we redid the clubhouse and all this type of stuff. It was a very large project.
Right.
We were awarded a $1 million SAM grant
Right,
but it's under the control of the senator.
right.
The SAM grant also does not get paid until the end of the project. We finished the project in 2020. When we contacted the state to get the reimbursement from the SAM grant, they said the sponsor had not got it through the approval process yet, and we had to contact them. We've had several backs and forths with the state, and they keep saying, go back to the senator. The mayor has gone back to the senator. It does not look like the state is going to honor that grant, even though we got the award letter.
I talked to the senator just a couple of hours ago, just to confirm.
Okay, I see.
We had multiple conversations around this, and as Jenny mentioned, ours is one of many municipalities that have been promised SAM grants, and those have not.
I see, so the money has been spent on this project.
The money's already been
And
spent.
we were expected a reimbursement and they're not gonna do it.
And there's a slight chance, very
There's multiple
slight
grants
chance.
like this.
So the senator didn't want to say it was never gonna happen.
I see.
We both agreed, based on what he was saying, we should certainly not budget, that we will have that money. We might be pleasantly surprised, but it would be a very small percentage chance.
So this $1 million is to then pay off debts?
No, it's not to pay off debt. The general fund has been carrying the negative cash balance.
I see, so it just is going back into the general,
No, what we'll do is we'll take the cash out of the general fund,
okay,
and we're gonna put it over here in the capital project fund.
okay. Okay. All right, thank you.
Just to jump in and just make it clear, the city was aware of what we thought was a very small risk at the time when we had this grant, having a grant award, understanding it's a DASNY, the way these SAM grants work, being administered through DASNY, that it typically takes 4 or 5 years before you get an actual grant agreement to be able to be reimbursed. Given that the grandstand was falling down in its own just about at the time, and given the history of these grants having to be followed through and reimbursed by the state, the city at the time decided to go forward, unfortunately, with the situation right now.
Yeah,
And Len, just so you know, we also have a $70,000 SAM grant for the airport security activity, which we also have not gotten the monies for.
The dormitory authority is very distant when it comes to talking about paying it up. It's been, I think, 5 years, 6 years trying to get the money on it,
I can second that.
so.
okay,
It has nothing to
Thank
do
you.
with
You're welcome.
politics, as in local level, it has everything to do with politics at the state level.
Okay, so now the tough report. So I gave you all the good news about all of our wonderful results and our surpluses and our strong balances. So now we need to talk about the general fund, not only the 2024 tentative, but the projections. So the final report is here, and it shows you a 5-year history going from 18 to 22. It shows you the 23 projections, and then it shows you projected 25 through 29. It is self-explanatory, but for the benefit of the listeners, I'm just kind of I'm going to go through the format of what we did here. So the 2024 tentative includes a tax levy going to the tax cap. And then what I did for the projection going from 25 to 29 is I did 2% between the property tax levy and the payment in lieu of taxes, because the combination of those two, if you stay within the tax cap, assuming that it's 2%, sometimes it's 1.7, sometimes it's 2.3, depending on the different factors. Sales tax, as I've projected 5.9 for 2023. 2024 budget, we've increased the budget from $4,975,000 up to 5.4. And so for 2025, I increased it another $400,000, bringing it up to 5.8. And then I did 3%, 3%, 2%, 2% for the out years. Gross utility tax and franchise, I did not do any increase on those because we have no control over them. This has to do with NYSEG and Spectrum and customer usage. So I just kept that at a steady amount. The ambulance charges, the 2024 tentative has 1 million in it, and I increased it at 2%. That is subject to change depending on any type of outside contracts that we get for ambulance services, but I wanted to be conservative in this projection. The fire protection town with our new contract, this is a definite increase of $50,000 per year. Court fines and parking tickets. Right now, this does not consider if we go to paid parking. The only parking revenues that we have here is for parking tickets themselves. So this is subject to change in the future depending on what we do in the future. But because it's not implemented yet, I did not want to include it in this report. State revenue sharing, I kept steady, assuming that the state is not going to change the formula.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
what is the reasoning behind, in 2022, the parking tickets jumped from 49 to 140?
It was because of our snow removal tickets. Our snow removal tickets used to be $30. We then changed the tickets to $100. So that's for all of the snow removal violations,
So the fine was doubled,
not double.
really the volume.
It was, no, it was, the ticket itself went from $30 to a $100 ticket.
Wow.
That's why.
So people stop parking in the snow because of that.
Well, they haven't stopped parking in the snow, but I think they're more attentive to it now because the
Because the ticket.
ticket is so much larger. Yeah.
Thank you.
We should go back to that.
May I continue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the interfund revenues, that is what the general fund charges the general, or the water fund, the sewer fund, the OPT fund, and the library for our general government support services. The interest on real property taxes, I just wanted to point this out. You will see back in 2018, the late fees, were 15,000, 17,000, 14,000, but they've gone down to under 13,000. Even with the increase in property tax bills, the late fees have gone down because more people are paying their taxes more timely. So I think that's a very good indication of the financial situation for the city. The next section has to do with departmental income fees. It's not a major revenue source for us outside of the code enforcement, and I just did a 2% increase on that. And you will see that the tentative budget, we always take conservative approaches to our revenues because one thing you don't want to do is over budget your revenues and then end up with a loss. I'd much rather see a surplus, and then you can take that surplus and reserve it for equipment. Civil service charges and the ambulance services, this is our contract with the town, the 30,000. It's going to increase 1,000 per year, which is about a 3% increase. Next section is interest earnings. Again, we had a very good year. We're projecting 338,000 for 223 for the unrestricted interest and about 230,000 for restricted. I was more conservative for 24 because I do not know what the interest rates are going to do. And mind you, if we have another 2008 where the economy dives and the interest rates go down, that money can very easily go away. But knock on wood, everything that I have read about interest rates for 2025, they're expecting it to stay pretty consistent. It may go down somewhat to the rates that we're receiving right now, because some of our rates are over 5%, but it should stay between 4 and 5% from what I'm reading. Licenses themselves and permits, this is the city clerk's area. Again, conservative, only because we've had some large building projects, so I don't want to overestimate there. The next section is sale of scrap or equipment, and again, this is conservative. Also insurance coverage. I don't like to budget too much on insurance coverage because that means that we've had an increased expense for an accident of some sort, or a payroll claim, for a workers' comp claim, or a 207 claim. So Again, it's best to be conservative in that area. And then, next area is odd things that we get or our gifts and donations. The only thing that I'm comfortable in budgeting is our grant that I know that we're gonna get from the county on our DWI, police vehicle. I do not budget for the restricted donations because that goes right into the restrictive, reserves. And then the state aid, mortgage tax, court facilities, and arterial maintenance are the ones that we routinely, and I did not increase any budget there because I do not know if the state is going to change the rates. Also mortgage tax can vary. If interest rates are really low, a lot of people will refinance, which will generate more mortgage tax, or if there's a lot of property sales. So again, a conservative number on that activity.
I'm sorry, Jane, could you go back over the gifts and donations unrestricted again, and only like 56?
The 57,000, yeah, the 57,000, for the projection for 23, 55 of it is for the ambulance, and then we've gotten some small $1,000 donations.
You just,
But I do not budget for restricted donations because it does not go into general operations, it goes right to the reserve. And then on page 3 of this report, federal aid, the 165,000 projection for 23 has to do with ARPA. And I will not budget that in 24 because the ARPA will go right, if we're still using ARPA funds, it will go right and as a revenue right back out as a transfer to the capital project funds. And the 134,000, I'm very happy to say, is from our COVID claims through FEMA. And again, the only thing that I'm expecting is that we'll be able to do another administrative claim on the COVID, which will generate about another $6,000, but I didn't put that into the projection. So you will see that the projected revenues for 25 goes from 17 million for 24 up to 17.7, 18.1, and so on through 2029, which are very, very good increases for a general fund. However, when we get to the expenses. So, page 4.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, yep.
Back on page 1, where is the code enforcement? Which line?
Code enforcement is, it's A1589, other public safety departmental income.
Okay,
That's what it is.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I summarized all the expenses between what I call service type. You have general government support, public safety, health, transportation, economic assistance and opportunity, culture and recreation, home community services, benefits, debt service, and interfund transfers. For each year, those are summarized there and you will see the total for the tentative is 19.3 million, which leaves a deficit of 2.2. We are planning on using about 457,000 from the reserves for the equipment, which brings down the unfunded portion to be 1.8. Now, if we take the projections going out from 25 to 29, I broke it out into the format that has been presented to this council in the past and also the previous councils. Personal services, broken out between police, fire, public works, and all other. And then fringe benefits, broken out between payroll taxes, health insurance, retirement, and all other. And then operations, self-explanatory there are service and materials, equipment, utilities, taxes, and debt service. So what I've done is I've taken those totals and basically put a 3% across the board increase on those, or if we did estimates. We estimated 500,000 for equipment throughout the 5-year cycle. That we put into the budget so then we can take those funds and put them right back into the reserves. We're going to use the current reserves for current purchases, but we also need to fund those dollars to be able to replace what we're taking out of the reserves. So you will see that the deficits go about 2.2 million plus up to 3.4 in '29. Now, how do we approach this dilemma? Because we obviously, our expenses are exceeding our revenue sources. So as I said to you that a few meetings ago, I'm requesting that you go over the tax cap and go up to the 10% mark. That will generate about 376,000 additional tax revenues. If you do that in 2024, I'm going to go back to page 4. At the very bottom, I totaled the total deficit projected from 25 to 29. It's 14.2 million. If you raise the tax levy in 2024 by that extra $372,000, that 14 million will go down to 12 million. So over those 5 years, you will generate an additional $2 million just by adjusting the tax levy by the 372,000. Also, if you consider not going over the tax cap for 2024, I want to say that I believe you're going to eventually have to go over the tax cap in the future unless we cut services and we cut positions, and that will make the adjustment to the tax levy that much larger.
But isn't that where we're at today? This is what we've been talking about all along, since August. We've exceeded our revenue. So this is great. It's amazing information. I love it. Thank you. But that's the question. What's the new revenue sources? So I went back through and I looked at the revenue sources. Little disappointed that some of them we really haven't flushed out. The commuter tax.
The community tax, I don't believe we can legally do. I think you have to be in a metropolitan area to do that. Your population has to be over a certain number, and it has to be approved by the state legislation. So community tax, I do not believe is a possibility.
If we're depending on the state legislature to do that, that's easily 5-6 years out. The college student public safety fee, that's not gonna come back. We've tried that one before. The storm sewer. Have we totally flushed this out?
In the different research that, and I believe I put it in my last narrative to you, the state of Pennsylvania incorporated storm sewer fees. It has gone to the Pennsylvania court, and it has been ruled in more than one Pennsylvania court that because the property owner does not have a choice to pay the storm sewer fee, it's considered a tax. And because it's considered a tax, the tax exempts are not eligible for the storm sewer fee. So if they're not eligible, there's really no reason to implement it on our part because it would just be two different fees to the same payer.
Also, while it's in Pennsylvania state law that it's allowable, yet there's this issue, there's no clear allowance for storm sewer funds in New York state law. The only one I'm aware of that it's tried this is the city of Ithaca. Right. They have voluntary contributions of millions of dollars every year. It just got increased from Cornell University. They haven't, as far as I know, been challenged on that yet. But it's understood from talking with labor counsel or attorneys that this is something you would be taking a risk on to implement it in New York State, certainly.
But I think it's volunteer, you're saying?
Yeah. No, I think it's implemented a storm fee applied to everyone, but it hasn't been challenged.
Oh, I thought you just said it was volunteer.
Cornell, in addition to that, separate from that, I believe, contributes voluntary payments to the city for sort of public safety fee.
Yes, Cornell,
And
I also put that in my last narrative to them.
If we were to implement this, it's a fee that's charged just like a water or sewer fund, not a meter amount, but it's a calculated amount based on impervious surface coverage and the size of your parcel, basically estimating your contribution as a property owner to the stormwater systems operation, capital improvements, maintenance. So it's a fee that everyone pays. If it could be applied to non-taxable parcels, obviously you can spread out that cost more so than you can with taxable income. But I guess you have to ask questions, if you're able to implement that, not be challenged and successful, who are you adding fees to? And the big non-taxable entities in the city, obviously there are colleges and hospital, and then there's churches and other, non-taxable entities. So that's a question to consider, is that strategy that
And then the way I understand it from paid parking, it's basically it's gonna create enough funds to maintain whatever parking space we have. It's not like it's gonna generate additional revenue that can go towards our general fund.
That's to be determined when it gets implemented and what the revenue actually is. But given our significant expenses of parking garage demolition and that project, I think most of that, or if not all of that revenue would be going, essentially wiping out or being washed as intercepted for those expenses.
Right, so kind of gets us right back to the second question, is that our revenue is much smaller than our expenses by about $2 million. Until 2026 or seven, then it gets to 3 million, stays there forever. So looking at our unrestricted, we would grow out in 2.5 years. So it was nice that we're looking at pay raises, but the reality is we just put ourselves in a financial position where we're going to run out of funds in 2.5 years. So either services are restricted, there's layoffs, or we come up with $2 million worth of new revenues and project out where we need to get to 3 million by 2027.
And I understand the situation, and I understand your comments. And as we talked about before, we were in a situation where we were losing personnel and not recruiting personnel and having all of these vacancies. And we had to do something with the union contracts so we could either retain our employees or better recruit our employees. We were in a very difficult situation where we had to do something. Or we would not have enough people to provide the services, period. So yes, I understand that we're in a situation where because of the different salary increases that we have implemented in the '24 budget. However, I think we would be dealing with different problems if it wasn't a financial problem. And that would be.
If you say that one of the avenues in which we might be self-correcting here would be by growing the economy locally, would that be probably the most direct route to turning this equation around?
Yes, and as I said before, in one of my previous narratives, the best way to generate new revenues is economic development. And that is through development of the rail yards, the properties around the airport, bringing in more residents, because you can come up with new revenue sources or new ways of taxing people or new ways of user fees, but it's on the same population that we currently have. And it's basically self-defeating. We've got a strong enough fund balance to get us through this crisis for a couple of years to see what can we bring in to the rail yards? What small manufacturing possibilities do we have there? What can we develop around the airport? And how many residents are going to come into the area with our different housing projects that we have? So that is how I believe we bring in new revenue sources. If we did not have the colleges in Leon, and I think that I've said this many times before, and I think you all agree with me, we would be like our surrounding areas. The colleges here bring in so many jobs, so much disposable income, so many visitors from our surrounding areas, not only from the United States, but other countries, the visiting professors, the visiting students. We would be just like our surrounding areas if the colleges weren't here. We wouldn't have we wouldn't need the public safety departments that we have. We wouldn't need the OPT system, because all of those things are because we are the city of Oneonta. And when you look at the nonprofits, and that was one thing that I pointed out in my last memo to you, is that I wanted to make sure that everybody understood the difference between the number of tax exempt parcels versus the value of the tax exempt assessments, because it's huge. Yes, do we have a high percentage of tax exempt assessments? Yes, it's mainly made up of colleges and hospitals and schools. And in my memo to you, I said, if we took that taxable value and we replaced the colleges or all the tax exempt entities that make Oneonta, we would need over 2,000 residential average parcels to make up that assessment. Or we would need, if I'm remembering the number right, 858 commercial properties to make up that assessment. So there's only 233 exempt property or bills, exempt entities, which is about it's just under 7% of our total parcel count. But in all of those nonprofits or tax exempt entities that we have in Oneonta make Oneonta. I mean, I think, and they're vital to our community. So in my opinion, we need to focus on economic development and getting the rail yards developed, getting the airport. Len, you and I have had many discussions about what we could do around the surrounding areas. I also had it with the town when I was on the town comprehensive committee about the developments of the surrounding lands around the airport. One was a forensic lab. I don't know if that's still in the discussion.
No.
That's not any longer?
I mean, just to throw this out here,
Yeah.
this is when this council voted against getting the taxiway, that $400,000. That killed it. The FAA told us in a meeting, you're not getting that money. So talk about economic development. That had a service road that got us down to 20 some odd acres of a parcel that we were going to develop for economic development. That's now gone. So that's the ramifications of
Are
these
you interested in
decisions.
rehashing that entire event, or are you trying to put that in our face right now?
No, I'm saying that
Talk
these
about
are
what the
decisions
issues
that
are.
have consequences. And so she's looking at
Every
economic
decision
development.
has consequences, Len.
I understand that, Mark, but this is part of that decision making. That's why we were trying to stress how important it was to get there, to get that. You're talking about the rail yards. That was one of my notes, is that percentage is not in the page 1 of your notes, your memorandum for October 29th. The rail yards are not listed in there
As far
as
as
an exempt, it's exempt value.
there is a section on
We've got
railroads, but
colleges,
it's probably
city-related, school districts, religious, hospitals, not-for-profits.
it's probably in the other. Do I have other listed? I'm sorry, I just don't have that in front of me.
But that's my point, though, Jenny, is that the rail yards is very important to get going, but in the meantime, for the last 10 years or whatever it's been, they pay nothing. Well, that's not been 10 years, because Wayne Trefferson and Pete had one before that, so let's call it 6 years, whenever Sandy Mathis was here. And it got converted over. That's when we dropped from 52% to 47% taxable properties.
And I'm just gonna give you an example. When John Nader was mayor, there was a company that wanted to come into the rail yards. I forget, it was like a
The wood burning plant,
wood burning plant.
6 people from Davenport got squished.
Yeah, and, but there was a big pushback on that, but had that come in to the rail yards, that would have been a huge development, for the city.
Oh, you're talking about biomass?
I don't remember what the company was.
Yes.
But maybe we can grab another avenue like that. I'm not saying that I have a magic rabbit. I'm not saying that I've got a magic
Let me just
wand.
say that there are conversations going on right now
Okay,
and hopefully in the next couple of months, if not sooner.
Conversation's going on for years, and
Yeah, well,
conversation's
I'm-
conversation, it's
Scott,
not.
Scott, I'm saying I'm involved in conversations, right?
I understand that, but what I'm saying is a conversation's a conversation, you can't hang your hat on,
Give me-
just like the sand grant, you can't, yeah, we're hoping to get it, but we gotta understand that we may not. And I get that, and I'm very
But-
appreciative that we're doing that, but the catch-22, when you start talking about taxes, is when people start looking to invest, and you're raising taxes, and they see a 10% tax increase, they're not gonna invest so much, because they're gonna be like, holy crap, so it really is a catch-22 when you start talking about taxes, and you're talking about economic development, you're talking about, I mean, it's just,
Sure.
that's what I'm saying, I mean, I'm glad the conversation's going on, I'm just saying like, that's gonna hurt the conversation if they get to, here's a 10% tax increase for this year.
Appreciate that.
That's all I'm saying, Mark, I didn't mean to sound rude on the other part of
I
that.
appreciate it. Economic development, the nature of it is those conversations take time. There are conversations going on.
Yeah, I think it was at the beginning of this year, I threw out an idea about raising, like having like a local, sales tax or raising the sales tax, is that something the city can explore?
can I just expand on that? The sales tax law, the sales tax is controlled by New York State and by the county. The city can only do a local sales tax if we preempt the sales tax with the county itself. That is how we ended up with our current sales tax agreement, where we share in 12%. That way we get 12% of the entire county instead of just what's generated within our boundaries. So it is much more beneficial for the city to share countywide, because as you know, our boundaries limit us to our development. But if we can share in all of the development within Otsego County, it's much more beneficial.
It would only be valuable if we merged with the town.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there any way to prepare, could that be something that the finance committee could look at? Is there any way to prepare, just to understand what the different scenarios would be, sort of, so we have never, we always have this discussion, we circle back to it, but I've never personally looked at numbers from the county, like what are, I mean, I understand what our 12% is because we see it, but,
You mean as far as
like
what
if
the
we were
sales
to
tax is generated?
preempt, yeah, like if we were to preempt what it would look like, do we just not have that information? I mean, we're, because we don't do it.
We cannot, and I talked with Alan Ruffles about it. The reports that he gets on the sales tax, first of all, he's the only, in Otsego County, he's the only authorized, if you wanna say agent or individual that's allowed to have the detail. But I'll give you one example. Moravito, there's several Maravitos all over Otsego County. So when they submit their sales tax for Otsego County, they don't break it out by this is how much was generated at this station versus that station versus that station. So there's no way the county would be able to know if it happened in the city of Oneonta, the town of Oneonta, the village of Cooperstown. They only know that it happened in Otsego County.
But would they have to if we were to preempt the sales tax?
Yes, then
Then they would have to change, they would have to change what they
Yes,
do in terms of their requirement.
But preempting,
Okay, that's good to
you know, and also when you said it would only be effective if we merged with the town, in a conversation I recently had with Dave Merzick, who just entered the room, he does not think that merging with the town would be a possibility unless we gave up our charter, which we would not want to do, but I would let David expand on that, saying that we could not just annex the entire town.
In fact,
We would have to
it would be
dissolve
reversed.
probably, right?
The city would dissolve and become part of the town.
Right.
And the city can only dissolve by act of the New York State Legislature.
Interesting.
The town can become.
And then usually what happens there, just so you know.
We can have
The town is a geographic entity, the city is in fact located in the town.
Right.
But it's separated out politically by an act of the New York State Legislature when you created the city. But a city cannot absorb a town.
But the town
Absorbs
absorbs
the city.
And then also, if the city were to dissolve, our state aid, our $2.3 million that we get now would go away.
I
I thought if we dissolved into the town, we could not then preempt sales tax.
That's correct, because if we became part of the town does not have the power to preempt, only the city has the power to do that.
Gotcha. That's all very interesting.
Jimmy, you said parts of the town can become part of the city, but not the whole part, is that what I heard? What did I hear?
Well, yeah, I said that.
Oh, you
We
said
could
that, sorry.
annex
You can
parts of the,
annex,
Part,
parts of the town.
but not the
right, but we can't mandate it.
right.
It has to be done by vote, it has to be done by the vote of the vote of the portion of the town that wanted to become part of the city.
I see.
I can tell you this is not a conversation that'll be popular outside of,
No, the town is absolutely.
We're exploring
against
avenues,
it.
that's all.
Just-
Saying we forcibly
Yes.
annex anybody.
in the interest of folks being able to take a break before we start a 7 o'clock meeting, anything else, Jenny?
No, that's all the information I had for you tonight. However, because this is the night that we work on the tentative, if the council approves the tentative, we'll have a motion to approve it, to go forward for public hearing next week. If they amend the tentative, we'll have a motion to amend the tentative as the council decides. Also, if you approve going over the tax cap, which we will need 6 votes to do that, that's also a possibility for tonight.
So when we get to that discussion part of the next meeting's agenda at 7 o'clock, at some point, we're gonna read some motions that aren't written on the agenda. If the council approves the tentative budget as presented, or the council approves the amended tentative budget, there would have to be a motion to amend the budget specifically, however you might want it.
Okay.
I'm so glad you guys understand it.
I thank you for your attention and your great questions.
Thanks,
I
Jenny.
greatly appreciate it.
Anything further for Jenny or any other?
The 5-year capital plan, equipment plan, you said that.
We're gonna have that on the finance agenda, I figured I'd put it on the finance agenda and the quality of life agenda, since they're both coming up, to be able to review a little bit of detail. That's something that's an attachment in the appendix to the budget. As always, it's a snapshot in time, it's sort of a living document. I figured it would be more productive to spend more time if we want to go through the projects that are shown on there. The capital plan won't include anything that changes the budget as far as what's included in here. If you look at that, it's toward the end of the budget document, where it lists the equipment and capital expenditures. So there's nothing that's on the capital plan that is not part of the budget. So there's no budget impact from that. So I thought we'd take some more time.
Anything further?